Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the pleasure and honor of having Luke Russell, a gentleman I've known for many, many years. And we're going to talk about how you can use film and video to create trust. And we'll get more into that. Luke, thank you for being here on the show.
Yeah, Ken, thanks. It's a pleasure. And I think, we've going on 14 years of knowing you. It's fun we both changed a lot over the years.
Oh, yeah. You've got skinnier and I've got fatter and older. Yeah. And grayer, for sure.
I'm trying to catch up.
Yeah. Well, you got a ways to go. So this is interesting. People that don't know Luke, he used to be like the king on Facebook ads and social media. You got a lot of mass tort cases, I remember. Really back before everybody else was figuring out how to do it. This is like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And the thing I like about you is you're always trying something new. You don't get stuck on one thing. And I like what you're doing. And I want to talk about it today. I want to ask you some questions. But you tell your story, why you started this company and what are you doing and why are you doing it?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I fell into this legal space by accident. You and I had a shared consultant back in 2011, and he was like, hey, I want to connect you up with this other client. He works with lawyers. And so I showed up to a mastermind group of yours not knowing anything about PI. And I had the typical tropes at that point of, ambulance chasers, and didn't see any value in the industry. And then I very quickly fell in love with it because I'm very drawn to the stories where people are misunderstood. And the PI industry, when you have these lawyers or any lawyer in general, you're looking even I think about my friends who do criminal defense and they represent people who've committed horrific crimes. But all of you are saying, no, look, we have a justice system and it needs to be applied properly. And I think I love that. And so I fell in love with this industry. And then, because of my background in writing and coding and a little bit of design and different things, I fell into marketing and I was already in that. And so over the years, then I moved. Well, I was doing custom Facebook fan pages. I don't know if you remember those, Ken, back when they had the banners. And then I moved into Facebook advertising and email marketing and all these different things. And I liked advertising. I still have a couple ad clients because I can't let it go because it's kind of fun. I love the data. But what I loved was trying things for starters. Like you said, I've always been trying something new. In the moment, if people are like, this won't work, I'm like, cool, let me go try that. And when people are like, you can't get cases on Facebook, I'm like, great, let me figure out how to do that. And then, so I go through advertising for all these years, worked with many of the biggest firms in the country, as well as little firms, doing all kinds of different projects. Almost 4 years ago now, I had the idea of starting a podcast. And so everybody has a podcast. I was like, well, I want to do something different again, because I can't, if anybody else is doing it, I can't do it. Nobody in the legal industry was doing really complex stories on lawyers, like who they are, what drives them. Not most of the interviews, and this isn't a negative thing, just we're focused on what they've done. And I was like, man, I want to let's go through their life story and let me draw out vulnerability. And so I came up with this idea of doing a podcast that would affirm lawyers as lawyers. So what I want to kind of draw that through line is that's a decade after I stumbled into this space. And I'm like, man, I see lawyers, I see the high mental health challenges, suicide, depression, etc. And I'm like, I want to do something that's like, no, you all are beautiful and we need you in this world. So that's the first point in which my professional career started to move into away from just advertising and raw, we spend $1 million. Did we get enough cases? And I loved it. And I found I love storytelling and interviewing people, and that I'm also really, really good at it. And it's such an interesting balance interviewing somebody when you're trying to go into vulnerability. I think about Ken when I had you on the show, and when we're prepping, I wanted to ask about some questions around the loss of your son. And when we were prepping, I'm like, I feel like I'd be doing you a dishonor if I don't ask a question, but how do you ask? How do you ask in a way that leaves somebody feeling okay? And because this was over and over with different guests, but you were one of my earlier guests. And like my father, who was helping with question development, he was like, Luke, you know, start the question with, Ken, feel free to pass on this. And then I asked a really vulnerable question. And you ended up sharing, and I started to really like over and over. I mean, I had John Morgan, shedding tears. I had everybody on the show, not quite everybody, but most people on the show shared stories they hadn't. So people are getting an opportunity to be seen. So I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And so then I really wound down the ad agency because I didn't love just volume of advertising. What I wanted to do was be able to try stuff, be really creative and constantly doing new things. And so I kept a few of those ad clients and moved into the space of community outreach. I spent 2 years helping 3 different law firms across the country reach out to marginalized communities. And I had really drove really good results. I just finished up my last client 3 weeks ago. So I'm done with that. I'll never do it again. But I went out and I built relationships in these communities with influencers in those separate cities and built up a whole friendship network. But I had a camera and I was like, you know what, let me pull out my camera and let's use that to start relationships. And let me do some interview people. And I'll tell you, every single person that I pulled out a camera with to interview them and like to help promote their business so that then the law firm would promote their business, those people, those relationships, we went from 0 to 60 in a trust space. And then I did a short film on suicide, and all these people suddenly were willing to share these vulnerable things. And the law firm got really good PR. It actually helped them attract a high profile trial lawyer to come on. And I looked at that, I started realizing, like, oh my gosh, when we show up and we tell people stories, I was starting to be like, this makes sense. It's kind of like basic human psychology and interactions, but in the business space, I could come in and say, hey, such and such a law firm wants to tell your story. I'm here because of them. And the trust building was so fast. And then you also have a tangible asset that, has like law firm branding on it. So each time a person sees it, they think of the law firm. But you also have somebody like me coming in and really sitting with them. So I was not very brief, but like it's this interesting journey that ties back all these skills. But now I've largely left the advertising, but because of those 12, 14 years I spent in that space where it was just nonstop ROI, I bring now that same ROI mindset to like, how do we tell people stories to drive business objectives, which can be everything from talent acquisition, retention, client acquisition and retention and referrals. How do you use film for that? So there we go. I was not very brief, but I hope that lays out like how we got here. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I know you did a film for me too. Was it last year or year before? I can't remember. Year before.
Yeah. No, that was just this February, Ken.
Okay.
When it came out. Yeah.
So I'm getting old. About my charity, Lawyers Against Drug Addiction, and we went through the whole deal about my son, overdosing. And it had an impact. We played it at the summit, and we got the most donations we'd ever got. And I think it was because of that video, to be honest with you. Because I get out there and say a few things, but like you said, when you tell a story, and trial lawyers, we know that when you tell a story, people love to hear stories and they retain more. And so the film telling the story, you don't have to be right there. You just do it one time and then it can be used millions of times later. So, and I think you're right. I mean, my big deal always has been that people are going to hire and refer to lawyers they know, like, and trust. And I think this connected deal you're doing with film creates that trust. I don't know. You want to talk about that or?
So we're working on a very robust documentary. It's the biggest project we've ever done. And we're going to be releasing it in looking at the end of Q1. And the topic is survivors of child sex abuse. It's all about civil claims. But this is for one of my ad clients. We spend $1 million a year on Facebook, get about 500 cases a year very consistently. And he was like, what else can we do? And I was like, well, here's this new space I'm moving into. And we decided to go down that path. And what's interesting, so we don't have a film yet, but we, in the outreach process of looking for people to participate in the film, mind you, we're asking, it's all around a vulnerable topic. It's also, my partner in this is a survivor, so that was really important. I was like, this needs to be co-led by a survivor, so it's because I'm not. And so that's one thing, like right there from a trust standpoint, I'm not like, if I'm walking into spaces that I don't have a shared identity, I have to like really be delicate or partner with somebody who can, because then other people are like, oh my gosh, I feel safer because they feel like they're going to be more understood. especially when you're dealing with vulnerable populations or people who've been taken advantage of. And so we're doing this film, but we have people with huge Instagram followings, huge social media or email marketing, or they have massive political sway, or they have like, it's really interesting. The people we have, like some people I wouldn't say have a lot of influence with bigger spaces, but just by coming in and interviewing, and because we're so good with our questions and how we create the space, we've had people be like, hey, once the documentary is done, here's politicians we'd love to connect it to, see if we can get it in, like, part of education. Here's people over here that are going to be with these leaders, or I just send me stuff. So tell me how I can promote it as soon as it's out. Some of these are very influential people, and we don't even have a film yet. So it's fascinating to me how the process itself, when you do it so intentionally, every aspect from the first email to how we talk about it, to how we are transparent, that a law firm's behind it, we also get creative decisions. So that's something that actually gives a lot of credibility to anybody who's wanting to go out and reach these populations that have been very taken advantage of. Us having complete creative control and telling people that lets them feel more comfortable that a law firm's putting their money behind it. But it's interesting, this trust process. People are so excited about what we're doing, and I've yet to release a single piece of footage, and we're already getting people rallying on how they can support the whole project and essentially promote the law firm.
So I know you're talking about child abuse, child sexual abuse survivors, and you did one on suicide. And have you done any other ones for lawyers?
Yeah, so we had a lawyer as part of our community outreach. There was a nonprofit that works with domestic violence survivors, and they footed the bill for us to go out and create that. That was very much a relationship building pursuit, saying like, hey, because then, and what's really cool is the woman still has a day job who runs this nonprofit, and she works for a major telecom company, and they're already like, her boss is like, who's fairly high up, like, hey, we want to promote this, and there's all these people coming out saying we want to promote this. And so it's interesting. So all the promotion of the film comes with promotion of the law firm, so which is interesting. So that's not,
Yeah.
again, not even case connect. I've been talks with one person about the idea of like motorcycle. I'm like, because at the moment we're booked, so I'm not like really hustling anybody other than letting my friends, we're having conversations about like Q2, Q3 next year. But motorcycle is an interesting space because I was talking with a PILMA member about it, because he kind of brought up the ideas. And speaking from a theoretical standpoint, because we haven't done it yet, if you show up and do a film, it can be a really short film or it can be an elaborate documentary. But you show up, and I'll put this out there, because if somebody does it before I can get to it, I'm all for it. Imagine a documentary, regardless of length, but it highlights the biker community, and it showcases how we're living in this time where we have a loneliness epidemic as declared by our American Surgeon General. And we lack all these community structures. And then we have this biker group that has this, like, very much like PI lawyers, a negative reputation. Except here's what's fascinating. This group, one, is extremely diverse. You can have everybody from the CEO to the janitor riding together. But they get something about community that the rest of the general population is lacking. So imagine a film, regardless of length, say it's 10 minutes or 60 minutes, a film that follows 1, 2, 4 bikers and showcases how the beauty of the friendship dynamics of what bikers stand for, who they are, what they do for the community, but also what the rest of us could learn from them. See, like, now we've taken this, and imagine the relationship impact of, one, you get influential bikers to participate in that kind of thing. You go out to dealerships and you say, hey, we want to host a screening. Who's not going to want to host a screening of a film that just showcases the beauty of bikers in a way that they're rarely get to be seen outside their community? And it's also framing it in a way that says, we can learn from you. We don't have to be a biker to receive your wisdom. So you create a beautiful balance in that, in a draw.
I see very great potential in like nursing home abuse.
Yep.
A film on TBIs because people don't understand it and it really screws people up. So, I mean, that's two. I don't know if you thought of other ones, but when you were talking about this, that's the first two things. If I had a nursing abuse practice, I would be all over this like white on rice. I mean, it would be so powerful. I think the more that you got victims on this thing, the more it resonates. I don't know. I just think it moves people more. I don't know. But you're doing this, so you know better than I do. I don't know. I would think so, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, TBI, I think both are really great examples. The as soon as we bring up nursing home abuse, I think about how some states have such really ridiculous laws limiting plaintiffs. But yeah, so let me talk TBIs real quick because I've thought about that one a little bit. TBIs are so misunderstood, and especially some of these like very severe TBIs have what people have labeled like invisible injuries. And so these invisible injuries by lawyers who are less experienced will get much, much smaller rewards for their client. And the TBI lawyers who really do this stuff know that. Like I mean, they're getting seven-figure cases out of when another inexperienced lawyer on TBIs might get 300, 500,000. And the problem is the public doesn't know the difference of this complexity. But also, people with TBIs walk through life not being seen, especially if they have these kind of things where your brain can't recall information or you can't do certain types of tasks, but you might look completely normal. You can walk down
Right.
the aisle at the grocery store and everybody thinks you're fine. And yet, you're living a completely different hell. That's the kind of thing when you show a light on that, people, one, who haven't seen it are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. People of that community, whether they're in the film or not, are like, I feel so seen. Thank you for just putting this out in the world. So with nursing home abuse, you have a similar, but it's kind of different where you have, and frankly, the heartstrings of that is pretty easy for I think most people to empathize and connect with. It's the idea of your parent being in this facility that's supposed to take care of them, and then they're getting abused. And yet, like the amount of systemic ways that it gets perpetuated and not punished, and it just keeps happening over and over. Like, how is this possible? But there's so many ways to take a story. You can go the route of something like, how is this possible? Looking at systemic failure. You can go the route of the personal journey of following somebody who realized something was up with mom, and then they went and they ended up having to work with a lawyer and kind of do more of a documentary process of like an actual storyline. There's different ways to approach it, but when you have a group that has enough of a population and the cases are valuable enough over time, and that film's not cheap if you want to do it well. You can show up with
Yeah.
simple
Yeah.
stuff and
What are you going to spend for something like that?
I
How
mean,
much?
it depends on the length. For a feature-length documentary on a biker community, I'd charge 120. For a
Yeah.
short and like the Beautiful Humans movement, which is, well, I know I'm kind of throwing that in here, but let me share that real quick because it's a totally different approach that was also intentionally designed for businesses who wanted to both support something beautiful and get a cool ROI out of it, or at least a marketing asset. I launched a movement called Beautiful Humans, and it's all about highlighting our shared humanity. But what we do is we showcase an individual's beauty while getting them to wrestle with the question of what makes somebody beautiful. These are about 12 to 15-minute short films, and those are 12.5. So much smaller kind of thing where if somebody's like, let me just try this. Let me go out to one biker in my community. Let's feature them. And then, 12.5, put it in your email marketing, throw it on some, put $1,000 on Facebook ads, see if it does anything, which we can supply all that for them. So it kind of depends on length. Like some of our document, like what we did for you, Ken, because it was a 10-minute short film, required travel, that kind of thing, we'd probably charge around 25, 30,000 for. It kind of depends on that length. But if you're doing a 60-minute documentary, 120 is actually probably middle of the road on pricing as far as documentary work goes. But yeah, so it's something that's a real investment. And so it's for lawyers. This is not for somebody this is for somebody who goes, we can allocate, like, we're in this for the long haul. We're fine financially. We want to set this aside because we think it's really cool, really beautiful, and really positive. And there's a lot of things you can measure that you're going to get out of it that'll benefit from PR to SEO to your social media to your email marketing intake. So especially for like increasing conversions, that was part of my client for this child sex abuse documentary, was he has had 1,000 leads last year that requested consultations with his firm and then were unreachable. He's like, what if we send these people a documentary? Could we just get 1% more? That'd be 10 cases. So it's like looking at all the different ways to incorporate it. It's not really a standalone thing. You'll get PR, and that's like a part of the things we do. But it's a really robust marketing tool that should be feeding into everything. It shouldn't just be a standalone investment, but nonetheless, it is a hefty investment.
Wow. And you've got this human connection initiative going
Yeah.
on. Tell me about
Yep.
that.
Yeah, so that's the overarching company that encompasses our film and then the Beautiful Humans movement. It really, for me, comes from this space of like I've studied as a amateur human connection for over 15 years now. And frankly, it made a lot more sense when I got an autism diagnosis, why I felt like I needed to study how people work. But it led me to getting really good at understanding like what makes people tick, what makes people feel seen, valued, heard. And I really was drawn to this space of like, how can businesses make money while doing human connection, while valuing that? If we show up and we say, hey, look, and human connection is a very vague concept, but it's really that human to human experience, which you can also create in a sense in a more global aspect, using that in a general statement, not of the earth, but like globally being in the sense you can create human connection through people by them feeling seen by watching a documentary. You can help them feel seen by, as a law firm, supporting something that they really care about and doing it in a way that brings people in beautifully. So for me, I've spent the last 2 years hyper focused on this idea of like wanting to prove that there's money in human connection. And that comes through spaces like a law firm being able to attract top tier talent that lawyers, some of the biggest lawyers in the country, were trying to get. And this individual wouldn't go, but because the lawyers showed up and engaged in very intentional human connection work with me, with this lawyer ended up reaching out to them saying, hey, I want to work with you. Like, how much is that worth? Like you think about that kind of stuff, quantifying that. Frankly, if I got in that law firm a 7-figure case, not nearly as valuable as getting a top tier trial lawyer who can make every single one of their cases worth more. But that's been my focus is this. And then we decided to move into this Beautiful Humans movement, which originally was just going to be my Lawful Good follow-up, because I was like, all right, I did Lawful Good. We did it for 3 years. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. I'm done. Like I did it. That was kind of it. And I wanted to, and since I was doing film, I was like, we should do short films. And we still do interviews with people. I didn't want to have to do the prep that Lawful Good required because we'd spend 10 to 20 hours preparing for interviews. And so with this, I was like, well, it'll be simple on the prep, but then the post-production will be advanced. And we started into that. And I very quickly realized, Ken, that like highlighting people's beauty isn't just something that, it's not even just an idea I like. When I look back all the way through my early childhood, this was something that's just been the through line. The idea that all people are inherently beautiful. And so I was like, instead of doing just short films with these, and so far all of our guests, the first 3 guests were lawyers, instead of just doing something that's just a follow-up, let's do something really powerful and let's make it a movement. And so it's about really, because you think of like, regardless of what somebody's political views are, it's pretty easy. I think we all agree this. There's so much fracturing, but there's so much constant dehumanizing of one another. And this, I think, is an interesting opportunity for businesses because, like, if you look at like researchers like Brene Brown, she's adamantly opposed to the idea of like shared hatred creating any real belonging. She's like, scientifically, that's not true. That's not real belonging. We create real belonging when we can actually dissent amongst each other. And so we have this cultural construct that leaves no space for us to actually see each other's beauty. So that's our, like, the Human Connection Initiatives launched Beautiful Humans, which was originally just going to be like a podcast follow-up and has turned into this sprawling movement and an invitation for people to see our shared humanity. It's not an ask for people to think, view, or believe, or whatever, anything. It's just an invitation. And so it's cool because that's how we're able to like weave in also how businesses can join the movement by choosing to feature people, but also it allows us, it's a really allows us a really cool outlet for creative exploration. Because film is so complex, Ken. I will tell you, I've never dabbled in anything so complicated. How we affix a microphone is extremely nuanced. It's getting, and like, let alone like the technology we use just, and then the settings, working with an audio engineer so that our settings are pristine for this mic, but then that mic has to be done differently. And then we'll spend 10, 15 hours getting the color just right on a documentary that's only 20 minutes long. Like, this thing's so complex, but it's really cool because for me as an innovator and a professional, it's really fun because the creativity is wild. So Beautiful Humans kind of also gives me that outlet to be like, we're not delivering something the same way for a client. So we get to experiment with film. But yeah, so you know me, I'm never brief. But that's kind of Human Connection Initiatives encompasses all the different facets that we're pursuing.
So if somebody wants to get up with you and talk to you more about what you're doing, which I think is fascinating, outside the box, I love it. How can they do that?
Yeah, so I have a website, beautifulhumans.film, and you can use that to track me down. You can also find me just on social media, Luke W. Russell. And also I'll just put my email address because it's the best way to just reach out. It's LWRussell, RUSSELL at gmail.com. Had that email for 20 years almost. And just reach out. Like I'm not in need of clients right now. So I'm not here to sell anybody. I also only want to work with people where we're all on the same page. I'm fortunate enough at my career to be able to turn down anybody that we're not the right fit. And so it's more like if somebody was like, this is interesting. I don't even think I can afford you, Luke. Can we talk? Yeah. Anybody who wants to say, like, I want to prioritize, I want to figure out how to value our shared humanity while marketing, that's a conversation I want to have. And so if people are like, Luke, I'd love to chat, hit me up. Check out the movement at beautifulhumans.film, and just you can find me on social or email me directly.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you so much. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.